All right, welcome back, everyone, to another live episode of Sky U Pod. We appreciate all of you joining us yet again and look forward to discussing some Gopher football with you all. Just a reminder to you all, you can catch us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and available wherever you like to listen to your own podcasts. So feel free to like and subscribe us on all those platforms, help spread awareness of the show. Shoot us some comments, some suggestions, even, and we'd love to answer and kind of interact with all of you out there. Talk about some Gopher football. Fellas, let's just jump right into it. We got some news to cover, specifically in the whole entire Power 5 conference. USA Today reports that the Power 5 conferences have agreed to a settlement of $2.8 billion to former and current NCAA athletes, setting the stage for revenue sharing to take place in the near future. Quote, multiple sources have told USA Today that they expect that the proposed arrangement will have a future impact of at least $20 million a year on the budgets of the athletics departments that pay their athletes the maximum combined total that would be allowed under the cap that would be established and then increase over time. Athletes would also continue to be allowed to receive money for activities connected to the use of their name, image and likeness, NIL, including but not limited to endorsements and personal appearances. Fellas, any comments with of what this means and going forward for college football and athletics in general? Let's start with you, Kurt.
Yeah, I got a couple questions about this. So the first thing that I think will be positive in my hope for this is that it takes some of the pressure off of the fans to be getting the players this money. Fans are already the ones buying tickets to the games, tailgating, doing all this stuff, bringing the enthusiasm. They already spend a decent amount of money on these events, so having the athletes actually get the revenue share, I think, is fair, or parts of it at least, and then hopefully that alleviates some of the pressure. But it talked about who a cap system potentially being in place for these major conferences in that article, and so I'm just curious, if you're going to a cap system, does that really change what player I feel like NIL is still going to be a factor in this sense because now players, say you're at Minnesota and it's got the same TV payout as an Ohio State player, what that will be, I don't know. Say you get $50,000 just for being on the team every year for being, from the revenue share. Is that then going to be on NIL to make up the difference of still paying them to keep them here as far as not getting lured away? You know what I'm saying? Is it really going to help everyone stay where they're at and be happy that they're getting money, or is it just going to be extra money the players are now getting and it's still an all-out bidding war through the NIL collectives to get these players to either stay or come to your team? Does that make sense? So those are just the questions that I have after reading this. In theory, a cap system sounds nice because then Ohio State isn't just, or whoever, the big schools aren't just paying everybody to come to their team necessarily, but I just don't know if it's going to have the change they want if it's still everyone's getting the same from the TV deal, but the difference is still going to be that NIL collective. I think ideally NIL has to be in-house now after reading this, as far as how it's going to go getting split up player to player. But I don't know. That kind of rambled there. But Max, what do you think?
Yeah, and I agree that overall it seems like a good thing, and I think it's definitely going to help probably the smaller programs or just teams that have a lesser NIL collective as far as funding goes. And yeah, I think, did they say a number or was there any rumors of what that cap might be? Because I heard 20 million, and in my head I'm like, well, that's only going to stop the Texases and Bamas and Georgias, and I don't care if that is the number, but in my mind I'm like, who are you capping? That's what's
Well,
kind of
and
crazy.
just one more thing. What I also wasn't clear is every player now under this cap getting the same amount, or is it up to that school to determine
Right.
where their cap space goes under this TV revenue share?
Right. Yeah, and I would assume it's up to the school, right? They can kind of divvy it up however they think,
Okay.
or I think. I mean, I'm totally guessing here. I would hope the school would get to decide, right? Like your starting quarterback isn't getting the same amount as your backup punter, right?
Why
I
not?
mean,
Yeah.
just to be honest, like, and that's what I think too. Like, yeah, the NIL is a nice bonus, and obviously the schools that are going to have more funding are going to be able to draw in more talent or keep more talent too. I think that's the big thing. But yeah, I mean, the smaller programs are going to get more of a share now and can give that back to the players. I think this would be more incentive for some of those guys to stay that aren't, necessarily the top, transfer recruit. But now it's kind of like if you're a above average player at a I don't know, a Rutgers, like why wouldn't you just jump in the portal? Because you're gonna make
Right.
so much more than you would there. Whereas now it's like, well, if they can slide a little extra cash to you to keep you, then I think it's hopefully it just keeps more players where they're at than
Yeah.
just trying to transfer just to
Yeah.
fish.
Yeah, I totally agree with both of you. I think that it's great for these small market teams. Essentially, we're getting to professional sports here, right? We're looking at this cap, and then we're pretty much spreading the wealth across all these teams. I do think though that this I don't think it means though for all those endorsers out there in Minnesota, this doesn't mean that you're off the hook. I mean, the more businesses or whatever it may be that can provide endorsement deals, no matter the value of those, I'm not talking millions of dollars to give to athletes in Minnesota, but just little deals even that just sprinkle them some wealth, that's still going to be really important. Because I do think that here in Minnesota, with all the businesses that we do have, Fortune 500 companies in the Twin Cities area here, I think that you could certainly provide athletes with not these huge mega deals that we read about in the news, but some incentives that keep athletes here and make it kind of a nice place to go to. I mean, if you think about, what if, Target or something like that gave each Gopher athletes, an X amount of dollars stipend for being a Gopher athlete, just based on being an athlete here. I think that will definitely draw some good recruits and retain a lot of talent here because, you know, there's no limit to name, image, and likeness. You can go and get yours, no matter what it is. So if that's not capped, I think that if you're a business or if you're Minnesota and you want to really see the athletics across University of Minnesota thrive, you got to keep trying to deliver money to the athletics department, and hopefully that spreads amongst the athletes.
100%. I mean, teams like Oregon, like this isn't going to stop them from basically getting kids on a scholarship that aren't on a scholarship just through NIL. You know what I mean? Like they're going to be able to get those extra players outside of the cap space. So, Dinkytown athletes got to keep doing what they're doing. They're doing a good job. I like that they got products that fans can actually buy and use. That it's not just like, I mean, you can just donate to them as well, but I think that's the way that fan bases like Minnesota are going to compete for now until we get some of these bigger companies in the area to actually donate, which there was a story, I think today or yesterday out of the Star Tribune about potentially working on that. So hopefully it gets done, but yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting for sure.
Well, right on. We'll transition here to our first topic of the night, and that is, as we know, the Big Ten West is no more, and we're transitioning to this sort of new era in the Big Ten and college football in general. However, we thought it would be fun to take a look at each of the former Big Ten West teams and see their schedule for this upcoming season and determine which game would be the most important for their success this year. I know that we divvied this up, amongst us. I know that I have Iowa, Illinois. Kurt, you had, was
Purdue and
it
Wisconsin.
Purdue and Wisconsin. Max,
Yep.
you had Northwestern and Nebraska. Max, why don't we start with you? Let's start with the Huskers. What do you think their most important game is this year?
Yeah, for me, I actually picked week one, their non-conference against Colorado. Last year, it ended up being a pretty hyped up matchup. It's first year of Dion, and at the beginning of last year, Colorado looked like they might have a real shot to make some noise. And obviously things kind of ended up the way they did. So for both teams, I mean, it's a big opportunity for Colorado to go on the road week one and, prove that they are actually going to be a tough competitor and are improving from last year. But if you're Nebraska, I mean, this is completely just pride. Like, you cannot lose your home opener to this Colorado team, especially when both kind of seem like complete opposites, right? Like, Nebraska is just Midwestern, like sportsmanship and just gritty, tough, play hard. And you've got prime Deion Sanders coming into your building trying to beat you back to back years. So I think for Matt Rule, it's going to be a huge indicator of how the year might go if they can come out and take it to Colorado week one. It's going to set the tone for their season.
Nice.
I like that. Yeah, I think that, Nebraska, I feel like definitely that first game against the Gophers last year when they really had a good shot at beating, us at home. I think it kind of took a little bit of life out of them, that first game. Certainly against Colorado, following that. But I think you're spot on, Max. I think a good win at home against a Colorado team that's, in my opinion, a lot of hype. I think that, winning that game at home will definitely set their footing in the right direction.
Yeah. I can go next with Purdue if you want.
Yeah.
So Purdue opens up with Indiana State. Then they go into Notre Dame, which classic matchup there. But I don't think, that would be a huge win, obviously. I don't think it's probably in the cards this year. It's just second year for Ryan Walters there. So I actually looked at, they open up conference play with the Cornhuskers. And I just think, that one, they play Oregon State the week after Notre Dame, which I almost picked that one, but I think just with all the turnover at Oregon State, I feel pretty good about giving that one to Purdue at this point, just looking at it on paper. So I think they'll get that one. And then I just look at, they open with Nebraska to start the Big Ten conference play. I think if Purdue is looking to make a bowl game this year, just with probably how close they are to the rest of the middle of the Big Ten, I think they need to probably win that Nebraska game. So I look at that one, like if they beat Nebraska, then I think, all of a sudden they're looking at their schedule with like, okay, there's a lot of games that we could potentially win now. Whether if you kind of come out and get, I don't think they will, but if you get stomped by Nebraska, you're probably like, okay, it's probably another, building up year of the program. Probably not expecting a whole lot of them. So I went with Nebraska as their first conference game. And I just think depending on what happens in that game is you're going to probably have a pretty good picture of what the Boilermakers are going to do this year.
Yeah, I like that.
Makes sense.
Well, I'm going to stay in the state of Illinois here and talk about the Illini real quick. Looking at their schedule, I mean, Illinois has a decent schedule here. Second game of the year is at home against Kansas. We know last year they, lost barely. That was kind of an interesting game, if I remember correctly. But I'm looking specifically at the home game against your very own Minnesota Gophers, and here's why. Illinois does go on the road to Penn State and Oregon, and they have a Michigan at home. Those are their three hardest games, in my opinion. Probably 3 losses. The rest of their schedule looks pretty easy, and I'm thinking if they do beat Kansas and they do drop the games against Penn State, Michigan, and Oregon, that's only 3 losses on the season. That home game against Minnesota, you're at home. You know that Minnesota is going to come feisty because we haven't beaten them, not in the Brett Bielema era. I think that, and especially as Gophers, we want that game. Probably one of the top priorities this year is beating the Illini,
Yeah.
So I think that, being it, it's the 4th to last game of the season, start of November, only 3 losses. I think that could make or break kind of the story of your season. Are you going to be a 3-loss team, or are you going to be able to, or are you going to get the 4th loss and then kind of just have, a mediocre season? I think it rides on that game. Maybe it's a little biased, but I really do think that to them, that's probably the point in the season where they're either going to be a good team or a pretty solid, great team.
Yeah.
Can't argue with that. I feel like Illinois the last few years, I mean, they feel like they could just circle the Gophers as like no matter where they're at,
A
they've got
win
a pretty
or
good shot
just
to
an
beat us.
extremely competitive game. It's insane.
Right.
I
Yeah.
know their fan base is kind of down from what their reaction is on Twitter. I feel like they're kind of down on. There's not as much excitement. I don't sense a lot of excitement from Illinois fans right now around their football team. So I'm curious to see what their season has in store. And yeah, if we could finally beat them, guy, that'd be nice.
Jeez.
It's very polite.
Yeah. There was a lot of thoughts coming. I'm just like, I don't know who's watching us right now. Let's just keep it family friendly for now.
All right. Well, good. Max, what's your next team?
Yeah, so the second team I had was Northwestern. And actually kind of seemed tough to pick their most important game because, like, coming off of last year, completely exceeded expectations coming with their new coach and all the offseason drama. So coming into this year, it feels like if they could come anywhere close to having a repeat of last year or getting bowl eligible, that would be, that's amazing for them. So look at the schedule, kind of the way it broke down. I was leaning between, it could be the last game against Illinois, just being the in-state rivalry. It could be their game to get their sixth win and be bowl eligible. But actually looking in the beginning to middle of the season, it is pretty favorable for them to start off with a good record. They've got Miami, Ohio, Duke, and Eastern Illinois all at home. I know Duke, a lot of turnover, lost Mike Elko, lost their quarterback. They did get the backup quarterback from Texas at Duke, so Duke might not be as bad as it seems on paper, but you can get 2 out of 3 in your non-conference. Then you go to Washington, that'll be tough. Then you get Indiana at home, and then you go on the road to Maryland. And that's why I'm going to pick Maryland as the most important game, because if you can come out of that being 4-2, 5-1 at that point, you're just setting yourself up for, the rest of your season to be tougher. You've got Wisconsin, at Iowa, at Purdue, Ohio State, at Michigan, and then Illinois is always a big game for them. But it just feels like if you can go on the road, win your most winnable road game at a Maryland that's down this year, you're kind of set to finish the season 6-6 or possibly 7-3 if they do something crazy. So to me, Maryland feel like that swing game and just going to be a big momentum boost if they can go on the road and win that one before they get into the real teeth of their Big Ten schedule.
Yeah, that's tough to argue. I'll go next with Wisconsin, and then should you have Iowa, I believe, right? And then we'll get to the Gophers. So Wisconsin, I think, probably has the toughest schedule in the Big Ten this year, at least, if not the country. So they have Western Michigan and then South Dakota, but then they got Alabama, then they have a bye week, then they got USC, and then their last 4 games. So they have Penn State, then Iowa, then Oregon, then Nebraska, and then Minnesota. Like, it's just an absolute brutal schedule. And in there, they still have Rutgers, Purdue, and Northwestern. So in the middle there. So I will pick one. I just think that Purdue, Rutgers, Northwestern stretch is essential for the Badgers. Like, they're got to get probably 3, but for sure 2 out of those 3 if they want to go to a bowl game this year, just with how tough that schedule is. I think it's very possible that Wisconsin has the same record as last year, but could still be a vastly improved team just with how that schedule lays out for them. So that's why I went with the Rutgers game is the most. I know that's not a joke. That's a compliment to Rutgers this year. I think they're going to be a very good team. Well, a good team that most people won't. I don't think they're going to be top tier, but I think they're better than what people think. They're pretty solid at every position. They have depth at every position. The biggest question mark for them is going to be the quarterback play with 8th in there now. But if that's all right, I think Rutgers is a pretty good team. And if Wisconsin can get that win against Rutgers, I think it probably shows that they're potentially putting themselves in that tier below the rest of the pack in the top tier, just with being in year 2 of Luke Fickell there. So that stretch is going to be critical for how their season turns out, and I think Rutgers might be the best of that bunch. So that's why I picked Rutgers as the Badgers' most important game, as far as indicating how they'll do.
I like that explanation. It makes sense. Yeah, it's a tough schedule. It's hard to really pull out a better season than last, given the schedule. But I think you're right. That doesn't really mean that they're not a better team. It's just kind of how the dice fell on this season.
Yeah.
I'm going with the Iowa Hawkeyes here, and kind of polar opposite than of the Wisconsin Badgers. Their schedule looks pretty easy. Their hardest opponents they're at Ohio State, and then they do host Washington. But outside of that, maybe Wisconsin or Minnesota is the next hardest game for them.
Yeah.
They do host Iowa State. They are at UCLA and at Maryland. I mean, those are games I think that they can certainly win, given their defense. If it's as potent as it has been, I don't see them having a problem winning those games. Having said that, though, I do think that, again, that same week that I said last, when I was talking Illinois, when we play Illinois at home, Iowa does host Wisconsin. I think that that's a very big game for them because at that point, I do think that they'll only have 2 losses on the season against Ohio State and Washington. And then if they can get through Wisconsin, I don't see why they wouldn't be a 2-loss team by that. They might be 10-2 for the rest of the
Gophers,
season.
that's why.
Yeah, right.
The Gopher pod, should he?
That's true. That's true. I just think if I'm just looking at it from an outside fan perspective, I think that everyone knows that they have that Gopher game marked on their calendar, especially given what happened last year. Not to say that we don't either. I'm sure that PJ will want them to prove that they're a better team, and I do think that the Gophers can do it. It's one of those early Iowa games, too, which I like. I think it's our Big Ten opener, if I'm not mistaken. I know it's theirs, so I think that it's going to be an awesome game regardless. But I just think that when you're that deep into the season, having 2, maybe 3 losses, and that's the last game that maybe will determine how your season will end up. I just think that that's the game that they really have to kind of come all together and prove that they're a solid football team.
Yeah, no, it's tough to argue. Well, we're all picking what we think is the Gophers' most important regular season game. As far as how the season will play out. Obviously, I mean, I think the one we want the most is Wisconsin. Am I correct? And I think we all agree on that. That's the one we want to win the most. But as far as which one will have the biggest impact, I asked this to Twitter, and most of the responses were actually North Carolina, which I think I went with Iowa. It is our Big Ten opener. The stretch that follows Iowa, you have Michigan, USC, UCLA, and not that I think Iowa is a lesser team than any of those 3. I just think with how Iowa's set up and how familiar you are with them, I just think they're still probably the most winnable just because you know them so well, and their offense. You've seen it before, even with whatever they've had. I know it's a new offensive coordinator. I'm not expecting anything drastically different. I just think you can afford to lose that North Carolina game at the start. Not that you want to, but I think you can survive a non-conference loss start and then rally with a big win over Iowa to start the Big Ten play, give you a little momentum going into the Big House. And then maybe you can pull off an upset against USC. And I think UCLA is a winnable game. I just think on the road at UCLA, against a team you don't know that well, that's a critical stretch. And so I think starting off with the win against Iowa, that's why I picked it or lean with the Iowa game as being the most important for this team.
Yeah. Since you mentioned it, I think that it is the North Carolina game, and it's just I think that the Gophers just need that hot start, and specifically offensively. If we remember last year, it felt like our offense was going to be pretty good through the air, with Athan doing what he did, Daniel Jackson catching that touchdown in the end zone to kind of seal the deal against Nebraska. I'm really looking for a game that really just opens up the playbook and just, I don't want to regress from that. And I think that if you can do it against Carolina team, who's probably not going to be as good with the departure of Drake May, but still a good football team and at home, I think that that just really kind of elevates your confidence in the season, especially with new quarterback position, a lot of returning weapons and everything. You just kind of want to get your feet in the ground and just get a nice win to start the season. And then maybe it's just kind of like the drama in me, the Minnesota storyline in me. If you head into that, week 4 against Iowa undefeated and they're undefeated, we got kind of a big sort of rivalry sort of story that, can really get a lot of the college football world, pumped up for. Maybe a college game day sprinkled in there. I don't know, kind of some history there. So maybe that's part of it. But I do think just to really get started for this season, a solid win against a decent North Carolina team would do us pretty good.
I almost went there with you. I think last year is still weighing heavy on my mind looking at this year's team, just because I felt like we got the big win to start the year last year against Nebraska. I'm like, all right, like the offense wasn't pretty, but at the end of the day, it moved the ball just enough to get it done. And then the next week, we went back to just running it 500 times. Basically, the rest of the season, we went back to just running, the running backs into the ground. So,
yeah.
I don't know. I guess you could also say we got the big win over Iowa last year, and that also didn't really turn things around, did it? But, there was a lot of injury bugs this past season. So I just think I still just leaned Iowa just because of the Big Ten component to it. But yeah, no, if we start with the win against North Carolina, I mean, I'm sure I'm going to be picking us to win almost every game from there on out, just with how confident we'll be feeling. But yeah, it's a good pick, and I think most people agree with you, Shitty.
Yeah, just to see what Max Broser looks like finally, and just kind of get some questions answered. Hopefully, there. I think the one thing that was interesting, and I guess maybe I shouldn't be surprised just with Drake May leaving and it being a home game, but I think we opened up as like a slight favorite even against North Carolina. Or I don't know if we opened up, but we are currently I think a 1.5 point favorite, which at home is nothing, but I don't know. Makes me feel a little bit better.
Vegas sets that line, and then our over under win total was like at 4 at one point,
right.
4.5. So they thought it's just odd. Maybe they finally caught on to what PJ's cooking with this transfer portal, and we're turning them around.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, for me, I will go with Wisconsin as being the most important game. Last game of the year on the road. Losing the Axe last year was tough after we'd had it for a couple of years. I think, like what you had said, Kurt, about the Iowa game being like feeling so winnable and kind of getting the monkey off our back, that if we can finish the year with Floyd and with the Axe, something we haven't done in a really long time, I think that's going to be just immense pressure lifted off of PJ's shoulders. There is a potential for that to also be, us shooting for our 6th win if things don't go our way throughout the year. Admittedly, it'd be disappointing if we don't have our 6th win by then, but that is kind of why too. I did actually look the week before is we play Penn State at home. I almost wanted to lean and say that could be the most important, just because if that's our 6th win, it's a game that we're not supposed to win, or we get them at home and we kind of catch up in a good spot on their schedule, that would be just a big splash for us. And then they kind of roll into Wisconsin with that confidence and not having to worry about bowl eligibility. But at the end of the day, as a Gopher fan, I mean, Wisconsin and Iowa are always going to be the most important games no matter what. So,
yeah. Well, they're for sure the ones you want to win the most. I just think Penn State's that team this year that's one where I see them on the schedule. I'm just like, I'm not going to expect a victory with that one. So it's tough for me to put it as like the most important. But to your point, I think there's a very good chance that Wisconsin game could be for bowl eligibility, like it was this past year. It's a tough
for
schedule
both teams.
for both teams.
Yeah,
Yeah, for both
very
of them.
true.
So, yeah, that's not a bad pick at all. And I think we covered the only three answers that I saw in when I asked people on Twitter. Somebody says it's always Wisconsin, which is kind of true. Couple people at Iowa, but I think most of them agreed with Shody with North Carolina.
Yeah.
But
Glad no one
it'll be a
said
fun year.
Nevada.
Yeah. Well,
I will say I think that all those non-conference, non-power five, you know, games are you have to win those certainly.
yeah.
And I
So
think
smaller
that they
games you
will.
got to win. Yeah, you can't
You
have a
gotta
Bowling
win
Green
that.
incident this year, or
No.
you're
No.
that zaps
That-
everything
unacceptable.
out of you.
Yeah, I do. Just before we transition in our topic, to all you Gopher fans out there, I know some rivalry games mean more than others, like the Wisconsin rivalry, the Iowa rivalry, but you do play for all of your Big Ten your rivalry trophies this year. I guess excluding the broken bits of chair, if you count that. But I mean, you got the victory bell in there, you got the little brown jug, you got the axe, you got Floyd. I mean, it's all there. I think as a true Gopher fan, if you can harness all those trophies in a season, and let's say somehow you also didn't make it to a bowl game, which would be unlikely,
Those are your 4 wins. Yeah,
that would be,
that'll be the best
in my
4-win
opinion,
season
a
of
great
all
season.
time.
You're right, Kurt. I mean, yeah, those games kind of mean a lot to us Gopher fans. So hopefully they can put on a good show, and PJ gets all the players hyped up for those high rivalry games here. But yeah, let's transition to our next topic here, fellas. A little nostalgia for maybe some of you out there listening. The new college football NCAA game releases in July. Over 10 years in the making. And we know there's a lot of hype behind this game. So we wanted to do something a little fun here. We're going to go through and predict the top 10 highest rated players here on the Gopher squad. And we just kind of want to see where everyone's at with this. I'm excited for this. I know that you guys are excited for this.
Yeah. So I feel like I thought we'd snake it. So Shudi, you can go first if you want, and then we'll just go through and fill the order out that way. But I don't know, because I don't know what you guys did. I actually gave the actual rating of what I think they should roughly be.
Yeah.
But in the back of my mind, I tried to also okay, but if you're the makers of the game, you're looking at this team. They went 5-7 last year. So how good are they actually going to make? That's all the thoughts I had playing into my head with looking at this.
Yeah.
And we can discuss it, and we can fight over the order if you want. If there's ever big disagreements, I think there's a clear number one. To be honest,
yeah, I agree. But let's start.
But
with
I don't know
10.
if you agree.
Well,
we're going reverse.
Do you want to start with the lowest, like the 10th player, and then
I think it's easiest to start at the top because then you know who's off the list. So go with number one. I don't mean to put pressure on you by saying I think it's clear, but go ahead.
It's got to be Darius Taylor. He's got to be the number one player.
I disagree. Okay.
And here's why. And part of me says this because I'm thinking it through the lens of the creators here, right? I think that if you're a creator of this game, you're going to just look who are the best players. It's probably more of an analytical look than it is actually watching the football game. In my opinion, if I'm looking at through the lens of the football creator of the creators of this game, I think it's Darius Taylor. I think Darius Taylor gets maybe like a 91 overall rating.
Wow. Okay. I gotta.
One thing
I disagree. He only played in 5 games because he was hurt. That's true. The rest.
Yeah. But I think too, he might have that injury bumped up. So if he hits stick him, he might be out the game for the game or for the rest of the season.
Okay.
I hope you're right.
Let me hear you. Let me hear your number ones then. What
my
did you
number
think?
One was Ariante Ursary. I thought he was the clear number one.
Yeah, that's my number 2.
I thought
Go ahead, Kurt.
Hear me out. Hear me out. Last year, out of everyone that could have gone to the NFL and all that stuff that got drafted, and that he was the number 5 graded left tackle, I believe, in according to PFF in all of college football, and he's number 7 on their list of tackles who are back this year, and he's the number 1 blocking left tackle returning to college football. I think of all the measurements and all the stats that are out there, now, he's not perfect, but I thought he would be anywhere from an 89 to a 92 left tackle in this game, and the highest rated Gopher.
Yeah.
Stay 99 is like a guaranteed first round pick, or like just an absolute stud that everybody knows. I've went off the scale of like 92 to high 80s is a good Power 5 player, like really good Power 5 player. I think it's got to be Ursery. I think he's the safest bet to get drafted this year. So that's where my mind went. Yeah. And it sounds like Max has a different answer altogether, which I would assume this is where John Joyner comes in.
No, and I actually surprised myself. What? And this is maybe I don't want this to be a slight on any of the other players. I think I had to think about it in terms of everyone and comparing like positionally, like where do they what tier are they in their position of all of college football? Number 1 is Dragan Kesic. He's easily a 92 overall kicker.
What?
He might be one of the top kickers in college football.
Think of the kicker. Yeah.
And I almost didn't either. I made my whole list, and then I was looking at it, and I was like, what did other people say? And then I saw a little list, and everyone else was like, well, what about kickers? And I was like, yeah, right. No, he's probably he's a top 10 kicker in college football, arguably.
You're right. Dang it. So I think that's probably right.
And I don't like
that is probably right.
Overall player is potentially our kicker. I mean, I do in some ways, but I don't like that it makes it look like everyone else is not as good. But
no, you're right. Compared to other kickers, I mean, I think Ursery's up there for left tackles for sure. But no, I think you're probably right. And I can't believe I didn't even think about him. The kicker. For all the times, a lot like us and a lot of Gopher fans complain about special teams, and then I didn't even consider them when we were talking about this topic. So, yeah, that's
just from like he's a guy that like everyone would at least see. You know what I mean? Like you can't really hide the fact that he could potentially make a 60-yard field goal if he needed to. Like,
right.
There's probably a lot of players that I would argue have a higher overall than what they're going to get. Just because like Darius Taylor, like he could be a 90, he could be a 70 because they don't know. Like, I don't know.
I'm okay with Kasich going number 1 if we're forming this as a team.
Yeah, I mean, we could do it.
How would be 2.
Like, that's our top 3.
Be 2.
We can make that like our top 3 tier.
Yeah.
Well, I had Taylor at 5 just because I don't think he's going to get the bump from the lack of games played. He should be a top 3. Like talent-wise, I think he's for sure a top 3 player on the team.
Yeah, I had Taylor as my number 3 as well. Or in the top 3.
Okay. So where did you have Ursery?
I had Ursery. My list is gone. I had Ursery at 6. But I kind of had him.
I thought we would be way more agreeable on this. I
had him at 6.
Overestimated that.
Yeah, I had him at 6.
For the sake of the listeners, our number 1 player, we're going with Dragan Kesic, right? The kicker. For number 1. And 2, we're going. It sounds like Darius Taylor because you guys had him together. That the next highest. All right. So if we're talking Darius Taylor, what do you think his overall is going to be?
I think 90 or 91.
See, I think
which is high, but I mean, he is the workhorse of the team. He is injury prone, but like when you look at it, he was the team. And I don't know how these game developers kind of put overalls in there, but to me, it's like if they're your main if they're the main workhorse and what's going to give you yardages and scoring, he's going to have to be the guy on this team that's going to make that difference.
All right.
That was my thinking of it. But I had Ursary at number 2 because, although it's, offensive line, not really as flashy, he is, like you said, a great player.
The other thing that I had
crazy, but that's right.
Taylor like an 82.
That's what I had him at.
Very solid, but he's also still young. So in the next couple of years, he should get to a 90.
His X factors, and so I don't know. I don't even know if that's going to be part of the game.
And the other thing I had to like try to remember too was like, well, what other we haven't seen the game in so long. I looked up like the 2014 ratings, and like a bunch of NFL guys were 87, 88. Like you're still a really good player. You just don't have like every single rate that high. So that's kind of, I don't know. I don't think you're wrong, Spencer, in your reasoning of why Taylor should be one of the highest guys on the team. But
talent-wise, he's up there. Maybe he is. Maybe they watch closely and know he's going to be a great player, and it doesn't matter, and he is like an 88 overall back or something like that. All right, fair enough. So who is it? Whose turn is it now?
Are we doing Snake?
My turn. Did you both go?
I kind of blew up that whole segment.
Yeah. Well, Kurt, you go because Kurt, you go.
Because I argued the most. All right, I will go. It's got to be Ja Joyner. I can't believe he's not in the top 3, but we'll go Ja Joyner. He has like the 5th best. Now it's tough to give him a rating. I settled on 87. Because what he can do is rush the passer. He's got the 5th best pass rush win rate or whatever returning to college football. The numbers don't necessarily support maybe that high of a rating, but I just think that his ability to get after the passer is going to put him at least in the 80s, or at least it should. And like I said, I had him as my number 2, so I had him up there a little bit. So I went with Ja Joyner at number 4. Now he's number 4 on our list.
I don't disagree with your reasoning at all. I just think he flies under the radar a little bit.
Yeah, no, he does.
He's a great player. I mean, I love watching him. He plays hard.
Okay against the run. He's not like he's not like.
I do have one player, another.
I know who it is.
Player.
He's my number 3. It's Daniel Jackson.
Daniel Jackson, yeah. I had to put him ahead of Ja Joyner. For obvious reasons. It could be argued that Jackson might be the best player on the team in the ratings, but given that we don't really throw the ball in the first place, it might be one of those, we've played these games where it's like, all right, you're this team that's not totally good, but hey, we're just going to give the ball to Daniel Jackson, Darius Taylor, just let it ride home,
Yeah. I mean, I gave Daniel Jackson an 85, so I'm fine if he's 4. He was in my top 3, but
yeah. I had Jackson at number 2 and like a 83, 84. I feel like that's like the caveat of all these. Like, I think they should be higher, but what I think they're actually going to get is probably a little bit lower, just because it's the Gophers.
Well, yeah, I kind of tiered it too because I think I'm guessing the Gophers will be like an averagely rated team, so I'm guessing a lot of guys will be in like the 70s, high 60s. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so I feel like we have these guys on there that should be like that, but then the rest are going to be kind of middle. But anyway, so you guys do you want to put Jackson at 4? We'll make this a graphic and tweet it out it's easier to follow.
Yeah, I would say Jackson over Joyner.
I think Joyner comes next.
All right, so we got 4 Daniel Jackson, 5 Ja Joyner. Go ahead. Who do you guys? I wonder if we'll agree on who's 6.
So if we're snaking, is it back to you, Max, or is it me?
We just did 4 and 5 together, so that was
I'm sticking with the defense after Ja. I got to go with Cody Lindenberg. I know he's got the injury bug. I know he didn't really play much, but I think that his experience and what he's done in the past, and he's returning this year, and legitimately, I do think that he's probably one of the top defenders, if not considered the top defender in the defense. I got to put him there.
He might be the most important to the team, but it's the same thing with him as the injury bug. That's my only problem. I did have him at 6. We're just in a different order. So, yeah, I guess I would agree. I had him at an 80 because I feel like that's the best they would give him.
That's a good
The
rating.
thing he's got for him is that he is fast. So, like, he should be one of those players in the game that's, like, really good, even though the rating isn't the best. You know what I mean?
Right.
Just fast hit sticking people.
Exactly.
Yeah, I also I had him at a 79 and like right around there. If I had the only other guy I have higher than him that we have left is Justin Wally.
Yeah.
Oh.
But I had Wally at like an 81 just because he's good in coverage and can tackle well. But
is he good in coverage? Half the time. Half the time he's amazing. Half the time it's no. Now I sound like I'm throwing shade. The only guy I had left above Cody, but it's not. I really messed this up. I'm far how we're doing this. The guy I would throw out to be are we on to 7? Right, we put Cody at 6. The guy I would throw out to consider at 7 is Devin Eastern. It's just an impactful position. I have him as an 83 overall because he's going to be rotating between those 2 interior spots. But I'm open to whatever.
I like it, but I'm gonna be honest. He didn't even make my list.
I didn't really know.
I'm not. This is. I'm thinking it of where I think the developers are going to have these guys.
That's fair.
And one of them you're probably not. One of my picks you're not gonna. I know you both won't agree with, but he's gonna be one of the highest ranked players because of his position. Solely because of the position he plays.
Mark Crawford?
Nah. No, I didn't even think about it.
So who do you want at 7 then? I threw out Devin Eastern.
Yeah, I think that's a good pick.
Justin Wally. No, who do you have? You have Justin Wally?
Justin Wally was my pick after Cody Lindenberg.
I knew this was
Justin Wally at a 75, and I think that's more than fair.
Yeah,
I could see it. I could be talked into someone being a 70 and a 90, probably, depending on the day.
I mean, Justin Wally, he's got those interceptions to his name, so he should be really athletic. He is really athletic. I just the lack of coverage. I'm not sure what they're going to give him on the lack of the giving up of big plays randomly, and like just the Northwestern game, I suppose.
Yeah.
Not sure what his awareness level will be. That sounds pain to say, but like just some blown coverages. I'm not sure what was going on, but all right. So we got 7 Justin Wally.
What is the list so far?
So we got 1 Kesich, Dragon Kesich, 2 Darius Taylor, 3 Ursary, 4 Daniel Jackson, 5 Jaw Joyner, 6 Cody Lindenberg, 7 Justin Wally. I don't know. Based on how you guys are picking this, I don't think some of my guys are making this list.
I got 8. Well, I have an 8. He's defensive line, but he's not Eastern. I got Strigow.
They probably will. I feel like they bolster up your DNs on those games, but it's
exactly. That's who I got next.
But Devin Eastern is so much more irreplaceable on this team. I
agree.
I'm gonna.
I don't disagree with anything that you're saying.
Devin Eastern, look how thin you get it down the middle. You really fast. Like
I agree, but my thinking is this video game.
All right,
that's my baseline. So you're throwing out
Strigo. I'm again going to throw out Eastern. Max, who did you have as who would be your next guy as far as your list you're put together?
The next guy on my list was Quinn Carroll.
I have Quinn Carroll at 8.
Yeah, and honestly, I would be between Carroll and Eastern at this point. Like, I think their rating could be right around the same number.
I do have them at the same number. I have them both. Oh wait, no, I did put Eastern in the 80s. I almost went 78 for Eastern. I have Quinn Carroll as a 78.
That's what I got too.
And we got to go Quinn Carroll at 8. Okay, so that's our top 8. We have 2 spots left, and we have Danny Striganow, Devin Eastern have been thrown out there. A guy that I had higher. Oh, yeah, a guy that I have higher than even Carroll and Wally. I have Max Brosmer on my list. I
He's
know
my
he's
number
coming from.
10.
I know he's all right. He was my number 7. Yeah. I have him as a 78 as well because he threw for a bunch of yards and had a good completion percentage. Granted, it was a lower level, but at 78, it's like a quarterback that you can still play the game with. Like it's just like he's not going to do anything amazing, but
that's exactly my thinking, though. Like that was my thinking. He's coming from D1AA. You know, I just figure because of that label, they're not going to give this senior quarterback all of the ratings that he deserves. But I definitely because he's a quarterback and a seasoned quarterback and a pretty good quarterback. I think that alone will give him a decent rating, even if it's in the next level up. But I do think it's going to be number 10. Or 9 would be fine too. Doesn't matter to me.
Well, we only got 2 spots, so we think Brosmer is one of those 2.
One of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd say between the 2, it's him and Eastern.
That's who I have as between the 2 go as well, with who we have left.
Yeah. And I would say Brosmer's lower just because of the unknown that EA Sports is going to be like, 77. Like, I don't know. That'd be pretty high for him.
Let's do honorable mentions then. Who did you guys have anybody that did not make the list? I have one, and it's understandable, I guess, but I
mean Brockington, but
he was the one I had.
Enough.
Yeah.
I had him as like a 72.
Yeah. Like if you look at the plays he makes, it's like, wow, it could be highly rated, but then his highlight reel is like a minute.
Yeah.
So
he averaged 20 yards a catch.
Yeah.
He only had like 5 catches, though. That's the problem.
2 touchdowns.
All right. So, our finalist, Dragon Kessick, number 1. We think he's going to be about a 94, 95. Darius Taylor, we got at 2. Guess we're going with the 90. Ursery, I had him. We didn't actually discuss his. I had him as a 92, but we got Ursery at 3. We got Daniel Jackson 4, Ja Joyner 5, Cody Lindenberg 6, Justin Wally 7, Quinn Carroll 8, Devin Eastern 9, and Max Brosmer at 10.
I like that list. I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Be curious to see where Koi Parrish lands.
In the game? Probably not very high. I mean, 4 stars. That's the thing. Like, they're probably going to look at recruiting, too, if they had enough time to, like, look at all this.
Right.
I got to buy a new system to be the game.
Well, then I heard too. I don't know if this is like official, but there's all these rumors that there's gonna be more of like a dynamic rating system. So like even like in game, a player's ratings are gonna change depending on like if it's home or road or like how experienced they are. So that'll be kind of more realistic too. Of like,
all right,
if a true freshman's a 72, he could walk in there with like 68 numbers because he's scared or something.
Right.
I don't know.
All right.
Or you skip practice so PJ is all over you and you demoralize a bit.
Or you didn't get as good of an NIL deal as you wanted.
That'd be awesome.
Oh, man.
Well, yeah. Any questions out there, comments? If not, leave them in the comment section
the question
below.
is, what the hell was that segment? I said we're gonna snake it, and then I was so baffled by your answer. I'm like, wait a second. I kind of completely flipped the whole thing on its head. I'll change my best for next time, and I'll just follow the script.
I tell you what. Next year, we're going to be a little more in line with this when we see what this game developer EA has done to these rankings. And once we have this as sort of a piece of evidence for us to look on next year, we're going to be on the same page. You can book it.
I'm still not convinced, by the way, that this isn't just going to be pretty much Madden, but with NCAA jerseys on it in different game modes. But we'll see. That's the pessimistic side of me. But
Yeah. If they could throw it back to anything like NCAA 14, man, like the
I
recruiting, the everything, that would be awesome.
I have my Xbox 360 still out just for that game. That's the only game I play on it. It's still plugged in to the TV, ready to go at any moment. It's been a
Yeah,
long
those
10
were the
years.
days.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for listening to another episode of Sky U Pod. Again, be sure to check us out on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcasts. Go ahead and check out our partners over at thecollegehuddle.com. You can find all sorts of college football podcasts out there across the country, read some articles, and just kind of see what content's out there on the website. Um, as always, thank you, Gopher fans, for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Go Gophers.